There is a kind of stress that does not always announce itself loudly. It does not always appear as panic or crisis. Sometimes it looks ordinary. It looks like checking your phone before bed to see if the rent cleared. It looks like delaying opening an email because you suspect it may be another bill. It looks like carrying on normal conversations while a quiet calculation runs in the background of your mind, adding up expenses, subtracting obligations, wondering whether next month will feel tighter than this one. For many people, financial stress is not one event, but an atmosphere. It surrounds daily decisions so completely that it begins to feel normal. Yet what many people call being bad with money is often not a character flaw at all. It is a predictable response to living too long under pressure. And this matters because money stress is not only about numbers. It changes thinking. It narrows attention. It makes urgent problems appear larger than long-term opportunities. It can push intelligent people into reactive choices, not because they lack discipline, but because chronic pressure alters behavior. And once you understand that, something important shifts, because the problem stops looking like personal failure and starts looking like a system that can be understood. That is what this conversation is about. Not simply how to reduce financial stress, but how to recognize the four stages people often move through when money pressure shapes their thinking, and more importantly, how to move through those stages toward something steadier. Because financial peace rarely arrives all at once. It tends to emerge in layers. The first stage is survival stress, and for many people this is where the money story begins. Survival stress is the stage where nearly every dollar already has a job before it arrives. Income comes in and obligations absorb it almost immediately. The psychological burden here is not simply scarcity. It is vigilance. People in survival stress often become highly skilled at immediate problem solving, but that same skill can trap attention in the next 48 hours instead of the next 5 years. The nervous system learns to prioritize emergencies, and planning begins to feel almost luxurious. This is where many harmful financial myths take root. People begin to believe they cannot save until they earn more, that investing belongs to other people, that stability must be postponed until some breakthrough appears. But often the first step out of survival stress is not dramatic income transformation. It is creating what we might call breathing room. Even tiny breathing room changes cognition. Imagine someone living paycheck to paycheck who begins automatically moving $10 a week into a separate emergency buffer. $10 sounds mathematically insignificant, but psychologically it can be enormous because the first $100 saved does not simply represent money. It represents reduced fragility. It means one unexpected expense is slightly less catastrophic. That matters. This is where math begins to support psychology. If a person earning modest income saves even $200 over several months, that fund may prevent a small emergency from becoming high-interest credit card debt. Avoiding one spiral can matter more than optimizing investment returns. Sometimes early financial progress is less about growth and more about preventing collapse. But there is a second stage beyond survival stress, and this is scarcity identity. This stage is more subtle. Here income may have improved somewhat, but the mind still operates as though danger is constant. People in scarcity identity may hoard cash but fear using it, or they may oscillate between hypercontrol and impulsive relief spending. What makes this stage difficult is that the threat is no longer only external. It has become internalized. This is where financial healing often requires an identity shift, not just budgeting tools. Because someone can earn more and remain emotionally governed by old instability. The question becomes not only how do I manage money, but how do I update the story I tell about safety? One way to understand this is through what psychologists sometimes call protective adaptations. Behaviors formed in difficult conditions may once have protected you. Hypervigilance may have helped you survive, but later those same behaviors can restrict growth. Recognizing that can be liberating. And this is where a simple system matters. Many people benefit from what could be called the three-bucket method. One bucket for essentials, one for resilience, one for future growth. Even basic separation creates clarity. It turns abstract anxiety into visible structure. Now, before we move to the next stage, if this kind of deeper financial psychology is valuable to you, take a moment to subscribe to Grow for Finance, because this channel is built around understanding money not only through numbers but through behavior and identity. If you find these ideas useful, like the video so more people can discover it, share it with someone carrying silent financial pressure, and tell me in the comments which stage you think most people get stuck in. Those conversations shape what we explore next. The third stage is optimization stress, and this stage surprises people because it can appear after financial progress. Here someone may have savings, investments, maybe growing income, and yet stress remains. It simply changes form. Instead of worrying whether there is enough to survive, the mind begins worrying whether every decision is efficient enough. Am I investing correctly? Am I behind? Should I be doing more? Did I miss an opportunity? This is where abundance can begin to feel like another performance contest. And here the solution often lies in moving from optimization obsession to systems trust. Because beyond a certain point, outcomes depend less on constant tweaking and more on steady repetition. This is where long-term math can be calming. Consider someone investing $400 a month into broad, diversified assets over decades. The extraordinary power may not come from perfect timing or finding superior returns. It may come from consistency itself. Compounding often rewards endurance more than brilliance. People often underestimate this because dramatic financial stories dominate attention, but quiet systems tend to build most ordinary wealth. There is also a broader systemic lens worth noticing. Financial stress does not exist only at the personal level. Housing costs, wage stagnation, debt structures, consumer design all shape individual experience. Understanding that matters because it prevents over-personalizing structural pressure. This is not an excuse for inaction. It is context, and context can reduce shame. Which leads to the fourth stage, what I would call stewardship stress. This is the stress that emerges when someone realizes money is no longer only about survival or optimization but responsibility. Perhaps toward family, aging parents, children, community, future generations. And strangely, this stage can contain a new anxiety. Not can I make it, but can I manage wisely what I've built? This is where many people begin moving from accumulation thinking to stewardship thinking, and the psychological shift is profound. Money becomes less about proving worth and more about expressing values. At this stage, beating stress often means simplifying, clarifying priorities, defining enough. Because endless financial escalation can create endless tension. One question becomes powerful here. What is the life this money is meant to support? That question can reorder decisions. Now if we step back, something interesting appears. Each stage has a different dominant fear. Survival stress fears immediate collapse. Scarcity identity fears insecurity, even when danger recedes. Optimization stress fears falling behind. Stewardship stress fears mismanaging meaning. Different fears, different medicine. And because the medicine differs, generic financial advice often fails. Telling someone in survival stress to maximize retirement accounts may miss the psychological reality entirely. Telling someone trapped in optimization stress simply to save more may intensify anxiety. Effective financial growth often requires matching strategy to stage. Let's make this practical. If you are in stage 1, the priority may be stabilizing cash flow and creating 1 month of breathing room. If you are in stage 2, the work may be challenging inherited scarcity narratives while building simple systems. If you are in stage 3, The opportunity may be reducing decision overload and trusting long-term structures. If you are in stage 4, the invitation may be clarifying what enough means and aligning money with values. Notice how none of these begin with complexity. They begin with fit. This is one reason financial education often feels overwhelming. People are given advanced tactics before psychological foundations. But foundations matter. And here is where identity becomes central. At some point, moving through financial stress is less about escaping bad emotions and more about becoming someone who relates to money differently. Someone who sees money as a tool rather than a threat. Someone who uses systems instead of constant self-control. Someone who understands progress can be quiet. That identity shift may be the deepest transformation of all. Because stress often shrinks time horizons, it traps attention in urgency. Identity expands horizons again. You begin thinking in years, then decades, then generations. That is not just financial growth. That is cognitive freedom. And interestingly, the math often follows identity. Because people who consistently automate savings, reduce destructive debt, invest patiently, and resist lifestyle inflation often create substantial outcomes through behaviors that appear almost boring. Suppose someone begins with no savings, gradually builds a $3,000 emergency fund, eliminates a credit card balance charging 20% interest, then redirects those payments into long-term investing. The compounding benefit is not only investment growth, but interest no longer lost. Progress often comes from removing drag as much as increasing speed. That principle matters beyond personal finance. In life, reducing friction can sometimes outperform chasing acceleration. And maybe that is one hidden lesson of financial stress itself. Stress often teaches where systems are weak. It exposes fragility. Painfully, yes, but also instructively. And when responded to thoughtfully, it can become a catalyst for redesign. Now I want to speak to anyone who feels ashamed listening to a topic like this because maybe you feel behind. Maybe you have made mistakes. Maybe you have lived through seasons where survival consumed everything. Being in a stressful financial stage does not mean you failed some invisible adulthood test. It means you are navigating conditions. And conditions can change. Often slowly, but meaningfully. One habit, one system, one identity shift at a time. There is a quiet dignity in that. And perhaps this is where calm begins. Not in pretending uncertainty disappears, but in realizing money becomes less frightening when it is made visible, structured, and aligned. Because much anxiety feeds on vagueness. Clarity often reduces fear before it changes outcomes. That is worth remembering. If you take one idea from this conversation, let it be this. Financial stress is not one monolithic experience. It evolves. And because it evolves, you can evolve in response. You can move from survival to stability. From scarcity identity to grounded security. From optimization anxiety to systems trust. From stewardship stress to values-based peace. And none of those shifts require perfection. They require awareness, then structure, then repetition. That is often how durable change happens. Quietly, almost invisibly at first. Much like compounding itself. There is a final thought I want to leave you with. People often imagine financial peace as a future condition reached after enough money accumulates. But sometimes peace begins earlier. It begins when money stops being an undefined source of threat and starts becoming something you can understand. Understanding creates agency. Agency reduces helplessness. And that alone can lower stress. So perhaps beating financial stress is not about defeating every uncertainty. It is about moving from reactive fear toward thoughtful participation in your own financial life. That may sound simple, but it is profound, because when people move from feeling acted upon by money to acting with intention around money, something fundamental changes. They stop relating to finances only as pressure and begin relating to them as possibility. And often that is where growth begins. If this gave you a clearer framework for understanding where you are financially, subscribe to Grow for Finance, because we explore money through behavior, psychology, and long-term thinking. Share this with someone who may need a calmer perspective on financial stress, and in the comments tell me which of these 4 stages you recognize most strongly in your own experience. And remember, progress is often much quieter than struggle makes it appear. Sometimes the biggest transformation is not suddenly having no stress. It is understanding your stress well enough to stop letting it lead. And that is where financial confidence begins. Most people misunderstand financial stress. They assume it is caused purely by lack of money. In reality, it is driven by uncertainty, lack of control, and poor alignment between behavior and strategy. Financial stress evolves in layers. If you fail to identify your current layer, you will apply ineffective solutions. This is why many people feel stuck even when they are doing the right things. Let's go deeper. Financial pressure begins as a survival mechanism. At this level, your brain prioritizes immediate threats. Long-term thinking becomes nearly impossible because your cognitive bandwidth is limited. This is why budgeting often fails in early stages. It is not because people are undisciplined. It is because they are overloaded. Reducing overload is the first intervention. When a person builds even a small financial buffer, something important happens. Decision quality improves. Emotional reactivity decreases. The brain shifts from reactive mode to slightly more strategic mode. This is the first real upgrade. However, progress creates a new problem. Once stability improves, internal beliefs often lag behind. This creates a mismatch between reality and perception. A person may have savings but still feel unsafe. They may avoid spending even when it is rational, or they may overspend as a response to prolonged restriction. This is not irrational behavior. It is learned behavior. To correct it, structure is required. Systems replace emotional decisions. Categories replace ambiguity. Clarity reduces anxiety. As financial position improves, further complexity increases. There are more options, more tools, more opinions. This leads to optimization stress. At this stage, the risk is overthinking. People start questioning, am I investing correctly? Am I behind others? Should I change strategies? This creates constant friction. The solution is not more information, it is constraint. Limiting decisions creates consistency. Consistency drives results. Eventually, financial growth introduces a different challenge: responsibility. When resources increase, the question shifts from "how do I survive" to "how do I use this correctly?" This is where values become essential. Without defined values, people drift into endless accumulation. They continue optimizing without direction. This leads to a subtle but persistent dissatisfaction. Clarity solves this. Defining enough is one of the most powerful financial decisions a person can make. It sets boundaries. It reduces unnecessary pressure. It aligns behavior with purpose. Another critical factor is time horizon. Short-term thinking amplifies stress. Long-term thinking reduces it. When decisions are evaluated over decades instead of days, volatility becomes less relevant. Noise becomes easier to ignore. This is why experienced investors appear calm. They are not ignoring risk. They are contextualizing it. The final shift is conceptual. Money should not be treated as a measure of self-worth. It is a tool for stability and optionality. When people attach identity to money, every fluctuation feels personal. This increases stress unnecessarily. Separating identity from financial outcomes improves decision-making. In practical terms, progress requires three things. 1. Correct stage identification. 2. Appropriate strategy. 3. Consistent execution. Without all three, progress stalls. There is no universal solution, only context-specific ones. This is why comparing yourself to others is inefficient. You are likely in different stages, with different constraints and timelines. Focus on your current position. Solve the problem directly in front of you. Then move forward incrementally. Financial improvement is not about dramatic changes. It is about reducing friction, increasing clarity, and maintaining consistency over time. That is what actually works.